Welcome to My Safety Training Online presents personal protective equipment for the eye and face. What type of respirators are needed? We'll discuss the types of respirators and their limitations, what you must do when respirators are required, what you must be when respirators are optional or worn voluntarily, as well as a summary and a quiz on all the topics. Section 1. When respiratory protection is necessary. When are respirators needed? Well, when you're in an oxygen deficient atmosphere will be one situation. When chemical permissible exposure limits are exceeded would be another situation. And when they are required by a pesticide label, or perhaps when you are required by company policy. What is an oxygen deficiency? Oxygen deficiency is defined as oxygen less than the 19.5% or normal air is 21%. Normally an oxygen deficiency will only be found in confined spaces or in a major chemical leak or spill. We will cover permissible exposure limits in the following slides, otherwise known as PEL. When are respirators needed? Oxygen deficiency explained and defined. Oxygen deficiency can occur in confined or enclosed spaces, such as during fires or large chemical releases. Normal air contains 21% oxygen, and oxygen content below 19.5% is considered oxygen deficient. Only supplied air respirator can protect against the effects of oxygen deficiency. Oxygen deficiency, of course, as we just previously stated, only occurs in confined spaces where many employers do not have. We mention it here because it does occur and can be deadly. Mental confusion can occur about 16% oxygen, and workers will begin passing out at below 10% oxygen. If oxygen drops below 8%, it can be immediately lethal. Supplied air respirators are required where oxygen is below 19.5%. Permissible exposure limits, or PELs. Most chemicals and dust have limits in the air that will cause adverse health effects if exceeded. If airborne effects cannot be reduced below these limits by other means, respirators must be provided to protect exposed employees. Section 2. Respirator types and their limitations. Respirators have major limitations. They can leak, wear out, or be the wrong kind. They can be hot, uncomfortable, and make it hard to see or communicate. They can be hard to breathe through. They are easily removed in contaminated area. The first choice is to reduce chemical exposure by other means. Most people do not like wearing respirators and may remove them to talk with other workers. Tight-fitting respirators are especially susceptible to leaking. As an alternative to respirators, these control methods should be explored first. It is your choice what method to use. If ventilation is used, local exhaust ventilation is the most effective. Another possible method is to reduce the time of an individual's daily exposure to the chemical. This will not work for chemicals that have a ceiling or peak permissible exposure limit, however. Use one or more of the following controls to reduce exposure to airborne chemicals. Ventilation, dust suppression with water, eliminate the use of the chemical, substitute with a less toxic chemical, isolate or enclose the chemical process, or do other processing changes. Respirators should be used only if these methods are not feasible or don't reduce exposure. Types of respirators. Air purifying respirators. Filters air through cartridges or filtering face pieces. Powered air purifying respirators. Filters air through cartridges with the assistance of a blower. Airline respirators provide unlimited clean air from a compressor. Self-contained breathing apparatus provide 30 to 60 minutes of clean air from a tank. Escape respirators provide air for escape only from a small bottle. Respirators either purify contaminated air by means of filters or provide clean, uncontaminated air from an air compressor or tank. Here we can see different types of respirators. The filtering facepiece, the cartridge type. As the name implies, dust masks can only be used for exposure to dust. These respirators are disposable and typically used for one day or one shift. Half-face cartridge respirators can provide protection against chemicals with the correct cartridge. Full-face cartridge respirators provide eye protection from irritating chemicals and fit tighter, making them more protective than half-face respirators. This picture shows air moving in and out of the respirator. The active breathing creates a negative pressure inside the mask, which is why these and dust masks are sometimes called negative pressure respirators. If the mask does not fit properly along the edges, contaminated air can enter during inhalation. Cartridges must be changed periodically to provide protection. Air purifying respirators provide protection up to 10 or 100 times the PEL. They will not provide adequate protection in confined spaces, major leaks or spills, or for certain highly toxic chemicals. Respirator cartridges are color-coded, as depicted in this picture, for the type of chemical or dust that they protect against. Half-face cartridges and dust mask respirators only provide protection to levels 10 times above the chemical or dust permissible limit. Ammonia permissible limit is 25 parts per million. The respirator protection factor for ammonia is 250 ppm. Limits on chemical cartridges. Chemical cartridges can absorb only so much chemical. When their capacity is reached, breakthrough will occur. You can't always tell if a respirator leaks by a chemical odor. Some chemicals have no odor and only can be smelled at high levels. Clean air comes from a compressor or tank and provides the highest protection to users. Supplied air respirators can provide protection up to 1,000 to 10,000 above the permissible exposure limit, depending on the type of respirator. The two types of respirators shown have tight-fitting facepieces. Loose-fitting respirators are also available. Supplied air respirators, or SCBA, they are depicted here. Airline respirators provide air from a compressor, and SCBA provide air from a tank. Airline respirators provide unlimited amounts of air, whereas SCBA tanks provide 30, 45, and 60 minutes of air. Loose-fitting facepieces are the least protective of the types of respirators. Air is supplied from respirators by means of a hose or from a air compressor. These are the only type of respirators that do not require fit testing. When are supplied air respirators required? Oxygen deficiency situations, high levels of toxic chemicals above the IDLH, or immediately dangerous to life and health. Other conditions or high levels of toxic chemicals in the air, as well as firefighting situations. Airs for tanks or from compressors must be grade D air. Tank air is purchased from vendors and compressor supply air for airline respirators. Compressor air must also be equivalent to grade D air. Low pressure compressors may not provide adequate air. Respirator personal protective equipment and the work environment. What is IDLH? IDLH means immediately dangerous to life or health. Most chemicals have a listed IDLH level, which is linked to the NIOSH IDLH table. Oxygen deficiency is also IDLH. IDLH conditions can occur in confined or enclosed spaces, large chemical spills, or leaks or fires. In addition to confined spaces such as tanks, vaults, sewers, IDLH conditions can occur in enclosed spaces such as rooms or buildings with little or no ventilation, where there has been a chemical release of a highly toxic chemical. IDLH conditions are much more common in sewers or tanks where welding is done or which contain chemicals or fuel. The NIOSH table has two lists of IDLH levels: original IDLH values and revised IDLH values. Either one can be used. Original values are typically higher than revised values. Original values are enforced by OSHA. Section 4. Respirator Selection and Supportive Equipment. Plant air compressors. Use these compressors with caution. Oil lubricated compressors are especially hazardous. Test for carbon monoxide or have a high temperature alarm. Locate air intakes away from engine exhausts which can contaminate breathing air. Conditions and types of respirators. IDLH conditions of oxygen deficiency require SCBA, or dust and chemical levels up to 10 times the PEL require an air purifying respirator with a half face piece. Respirators must fit properly. Fit testing must be done before first wearing a respirator. Tight-fitting respirators must fit properly to prevent leaks around the edges, and beards are not allowed when wearing tight-fitting respirators because they will leak. Tight-fitting respirators do not allow beards because they will not always cause the respirator to leak around the edges. Even a day's growth of facial hair can cause a leak. Mustaches are usually okay. Goatees can usually cause a respirator to leak because they are small. Safety takes priority over appearance. Respirator fit testing. Checking the fit of the respirator on individual employees requires for all tight-fitting respirators. 4 qualitative methods and 3 quantitative are available. Quantitative methods are more accurate. Fit testing methods are covered in detail under the respirator rule put out by OSHA. Fit testing methods are spelled out in detail in the respirator rule. There are 4 qualitative methods: banana oil, Bitrex, saccharin, and irritant smoke, and 3 quantitative methods where instruments are used. The quantitative methods are called the port account. Medical evaluations are required for anyone wearing respirators. Respirator use places a burden on the body. Respirators can be hazardous to people with heart or lung problems. Air purifying respirators restrict breathing, particularly during heavy exercise. And they can also add to heat stress in hot conditions. Medical questionnaire. The first step in a medical evaluation is a confidential medical questionnaire. The employee completes it and sends it directly to the medical provider. The medical provider decides if a medical exam is needed. These results are only used to determine if respirators can be worn. Respirator cleaning and maintenance. Respirators must be cleaned, inspected, and maintained regularly. Respirator maintenance are also essential for properly functioning. Store them in a clean, dry place. Cartridges are not cleaned, only disposed of. Regular cleaning is especially important in dusty conditions. Respirator program components. Section 5. Training was required for any employee wearing a respirator. Training must cover why the respirators are needed, their limitations, how to clean them and maintain them, and how to use them. Hands-on training is especially important for emergencies and SCBA use. Remember, document all aspects of the program. What is required in a respirator program? Respirator program administrators have written procedures and records, proper respirator selection, medical evaluation of the respirator users, do fitness testing of respirators to each user, do respirator maintenance, repair, storage, and assure air quality for supplied air respirators. These are all components of employee training. Respiratory protection program elements. Prepared materials from manufacturers from the OSHA sample program and other boilerplate operations. They must be workplace specific. Much of your written program can be composed of compiled procedures from several sources. Some procedures will need to reflect your specific workplace practices. If you allow employees to wear respirators in the voluntary situations, they must be provided with a mandatory handout to ensure safe use and provided medical evaluations. You must ensure that proper cleaning and storage and maintenance occurs, and these requirements are only applied to voluntary use of respirators. Fitness testing is not required in voluntary situations. OSHA respirator regulations are covered under 1910.134. Everything is present in this presentation is required in these regulations. Section 6, Respirator Safety Summary. Fit testing is extremely important because without a tight fit, a respirator is nearly useless. IDLH is defined as an atmospheric condition that would cause an immediate threat to life or cause permanent or delayed adverse health effects or interfere with an employee's ability to escape. Loose-fitting faceplates is the least protective of the type. Types of respirators include air purifying respirators, filters through cartridges, filtering face pieces. Airline respirators provide unlimited clean air from a compressor. As an alternative to respirators, the control methods of engineering can be explored first. It is your choice what method will be used. If ventilation is used, local exhaust ventilation is the most effective. Another possible method is to reduce the time of an individual's daily exposure to the chemical.